the Ghanaian embassy in Niger is exploring the possibility of evacuating Ghanaian citizens as President Akufo-Addo and his West African counterpart leaders are set to make a final decision on deploying soldiers to restore constitutional order in Niger. A meeting will be held today, you understand, between leadership of the Ghanaian community and officials of Ghana's embassy in Niamey to explore the possibility of an evacuation exercise. Seydou Abudu is president of the Ghanaian community in Niger. We were trying to reach him, but he's unavailable at the moment. But he makes us understand that that meeting is scheduled to happen. But let's now speak to Colonel Festus Abuaji. He's drafted a report on scenarios of ECOWAS intervention in Niger. Grateful for your time, Colonel, and it's a real pleasure to have you here. And I'm very happy with the scenarios you have painted, because when we heard of ECOWAS's decision to move into Niger with, troops, that was on another angle. It became interesting when Niger and Mali said, not Niger, Burkina Faso, I beg your pardon, and Mali said, if you do this, we will consider it a declaration of war. Run us through briefly these scenarios that you create of what is likely to happen if ECOWAS goes ahead with the threat. Hello, Colonel.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Madam Abubeidu. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, please.
Yes. Well, we all knew that the political deadline passed yesterday. But let me explain that the political timeline in such circumstances are different from the military timeline. So the mere fact that yesterday passed and there was no intervention doesn't mean that there may not be an intervention. The chiefs of military forces within the region are meeting. They need to establish a joint headquarters, appoint a commander, that's by the political authorities. They need to plan the campaign into detail. Meanwhile, obtaining intelligence and so on and so forth. They need to go back and brief the political authorities on the military plan and get the political approval before they go in. So we should not rush into saying that because yesterday passed and nothing happened, nothing is going to happen. With that in the background, I thought that I should exercise my brains around some of the hypothetical scenarios that could unfold in the event of an actual military intervention. And the one that I started with is that the CNSP, which is the Council for the National Safeguarding of the Homeland, established by the coup plotters, headed by General Abdurrahmani Chiani, are very resilient. They mobilize and exploit, popular support within the country, and are able to resist all the pressure that ECOWAS, places on them. I mean, broadly, that is one. So the intervention does not achieve its set objectives. Or ECOWAS goes in and quickly succeeds, which I call a swift triumph. That could involve a number of dynamics. The CNSP capitulates. It is isolated from the rest of the army because the army now withdraws its support as it had done on the 28th of July. And then ECOWAS is able to reinstate, Mr. Mohamed Bazoum as president. And that is the end of the story. ECOWAS has achieved its aim. The third scenario could be one that I provocatively call the Bakhmut type standoff, where, yes, ECOWAS makes an initial entry successfully, but then comes up against stiff resistance from the CNSP and the rest of the Nigerian forces, supported by, Nigerian citizens. And this then attenuates and we get into the scenario of ECOMOG, where we went in to educate Ghanaians, and we ended up staying some 9 or so years, including into Sierra Leone. There will be serious casualties on both sides. And when that happens, back at home, people will start asking whether it was indeed necessary for ECOWAS to even have intervened. The civilian casualties will also demand some humanitarian assistance, and therefore there will be pressure on ECOWAS to actually rein in the intervention and look for some, political settlement. The last scenario is a mixed outcome. Yes, ECOWAS goes in, but then it gets bogged down. It doesn't achieve its aim, and it becomes a stalemate. And ECOWAS then needs to come back to the drawing table and see whether it can engage, effectively with these actors. So in between these scenarios, you're going to have the role of the media, for instance, including social media, in shaping narratives.
Right.
You're going to have intelligence agencies who currently are working behind the scenes, whether Eastern intelligence agencies or Western intelligence agencies, including direct or some covert involvement in the situation, whether by Wagner, for instance, which I decided not to mention, or whether by the remnants of Western forces, whether U.S. or, France, and so on and so forth. In the long run, regional stability could worsen. And I've tried to point out that in the case of scenario 3, for instance, when the troops that are going to participate in the intervention return home, that is those who survive, we must expect that there are going to be more coups rather than less coups, because they may rise up against their governments who hurriedly, hastily, decided on an intervention. All said and done, I say that the best way of preventing coups is to analyze the root causes of coups and address those root causes. And
we'll be going to that shortly, Kennel, because it's an interesting conversation that we've been having since the coup happened in Niger. But there are those who have a certain understanding of why Burkina Faso and Mali could be offering support to Niger. And I'd like to take your thoughts on whether their appreciation of what is happening is close to the truth or not. The suspicion is that if ECOWAS succeeds in Niger, then it could possibly encourage an invasion of Mali and Burkina Faso. And that is why Burkina Faso and Mali think that Niger deserves their support in this particular situation. Is that a proper appreciation of the situation?
I don't think it is. Indeed, I chose not to put in the economic factor into my scenario. But you and I know that as we speak, many countries in West Africa, including Ghana, are facing serious economic challenges. So raising funds in order to procure logistical support, equipment, what we call combat service support, the food, the fuel, the maintenance of the vehicles, is not going to be easy. Now, ECOWAS is not going to be in a position to fight multiple campaigns, first starting from Niger, and then extending into Burkina Faso, and then extending into Mali, and then into Guinea. All along, forgetting that in these countries, excluding Guinea, there is also an existential threat in the form of the jihadist terrorism and insurgency. So ECOWAS's adventurism, by trying to think that it can easily go into Niger, and once it succeeds in my scenario 2, be emboldened now to extend the operation into these others, is not going to be feasible. And it's not going to be an immediate option. Maybe they will take time now to withdraw from Niger and think about Burkina Faso, and then sequentially think about Mali and think about Guinea. But they are not going to be able simultaneously to conduct operations in all of these countries. In my scenario, to remember, if you read it, I was very careful to say if at all, because I did not want to introduce the feasibility of the operation. Once I assume that there is not going to be an operation, of course, there is no need for any further analysis. And that is the end of the story. So I decided to explore the various possibilities, but then conclude by saying that if at all, given the political circumstances, of course, I've written that the various ECOWAS countries, in the kinds of democratic dispensations that we have, unlike Abacha's side, when we're all military dictatorship, we need to go to our legislature and get the approval of our parliaments and senate, and then mobilize the funds and go in. Already we know that in Nigeria, the Nigerian Senate has rejected Tinubu's request for that kind of operation. Of course, we should be mindful also that in 2016, 2017, the former Nigerian head, what was his name? The immediate past president of Nigeria made a similar request to his Senate. The Senate rejected it. He still went ahead. Times have changed. The situation in the Gambia in 2016 is very different, geographically, security-wise, military-wise, very, very different from Niger. And therefore, one cannot conclude that because it was possible in the Gambia, it's going to be possible in Niger. Hello?
We know that the Ghanaian authorities are trying to evacuate Ghanaian citizens from the place. Yes. As you mentioned, the deadline was yesterday. There's been no invasion, but that does not mean that it will not happen. How soon should we be seeing Ghanaians in Niger being evacuated?
Well, we have given the impression that Western lives are more important. So, for instance, in the case of Ukraine, many other countries decided to evacuate their citizens from Ukraine. Until lately, or later in the day, Ghana did so. So once you see, because they have got the resources for very rigorous assessment and critical appraisal of security situations. Once they decide to remove their citizens from such theaters, we should pick up the signal, even if we haven't done our own intelligence. In my scenario, somewhere, I've suggested that if ECOWAS succeeds, for instance, the ordinary citizens, if not the military, will target ECOWAS nationalities or citizens that are in Niger. So to avoid all of these, circumstances, get your citizens out of the place, especially if Ghana is going to be part of the ECOWAS force. We have not decided as a country, I haven't heard it maybe, but it's not a done deal that because the political authorities meet in Abuja and decide that an invasion is going to take place, necessarily all the remaining, how many? 15 minus these 4 countries will make it 11, I think, that all the 11 other countries, are going to participate. Even if they participate, they could participate in different ways. Direct participation in the intervention is one option. Providing some logistical intelligence sharing and so on is another option. Or advocating for what I was told by your producer, the due fiasem. In other words, we adopt a more cautious approach and we emphasize more of diplomacy, of dialogue, of mediation and negotiation, rather than just going in with guns blazing to resolve a political constitutional crisis in a country with the use of force. It comes with a lot of risk. And I think Ghana needs to sit down and appraise the situation vis-a-vis the decision of ECOWAS and determine whether its participation directly in the military intervention is in the national interest of this country. We want secure borders. We want trade to go on. Not long ago, we heard that about $40 million or so onions are traded between Niamey and here. That trade will just disappear. The traders will be out of business. Those who need the onions will not be able to have the onions, and so on. It will have a lot of other collateral, consequences or impact on restaurants and so on. So it's not just a very simple matter that we're going to go in. Given our location geographically, our proximity to Niger, even though we cannot go directly to Niger, and we can't go through Burkina because Burkina will not allow us to have safe passage, we need to go through Benin. And Benin itself has suggested any country that takes part in the intervention could pay a price.
Right. Colonel, I appreciate your time here this morning. Colonel Festus Abuaja retired as a conflict and security analyst. And Colonel, we will be monitoring the situation in Niger and reach out to you as the developments occur.